Hello, everyone. This is Cole from the American Journal of Healthcare Strategy, joined by a really special guest today, a triple board certified physician, Dr. Allison Kole. Dr. Kole, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Cole. I really appreciate it. I am a expert in pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine, and sleep is my waking passion. I absolutely am enthralled with sleep. So, I am um, first and foremost a mom to two amazing little girls. I was a full time practicing clinician doing ICU work. I was a active pulmonologist, and I ran a large sleep program for a large multi specialty group in my neck of the woods here in the great state of New Jersey until I decided to branch out on my own, create a little bit different type of work environment for myself. And so with that, I decided to start a sleep telemedicine practice with Oak Health Center. So I'm the medical director there. I'm also the director of medical affairs and clinical strategy at US Health Connect.
Thank you so much for taking some of your very valuable time with your packed schedule to come and talk with our audience.
Absolutely.
Really excited to talk with you. The first question I have is, you got your MD MPH right from Tufts way back then. Did you already know you were going into sleep medicine kind of at the beginning? Was that already something on your horizon?
Actually, no. No. So I for those of anyone listening here who may have had a little bit not the standard trajectory, I would say mine was a little bit off the beaten path, not so much directly, but I did take a couple years off basically, meaning that I finished undergrad and then I actually worked as a pulmonary function tech. Back in the day, you could do that sort of thing, and it was at Columbia University. And that was my first exposure to pulmonary medicine. And so I would be the person cleaning the bronchoscopes and, handing people saline lavages and things like that. I was doing pulmonary function testing on patients. And so I grew this actual real passion for pulmonary medicine initially. So when I had the opportunity to go to medical school, that's where I really thought I would shine. I think the bells and whistles of walking into a critically ill ICU room and with a patient on 400 drips, it seemed like they had all the little things hanging, and I was like, people must be geniuses who take care of these people. Oh my goodness, what is happening here? And so I had this deep admiration for all the pulmonologists. So I actually started off primarily interested in pulmonary and ICU medicine. Truth be told, nobody talked about sleep. It wasn't anything that was a priority. It really wasn't.
And so it's interesting too because you now have not sure if you had medical school debt, but you had this financial consideration, right? You'd already spent years getting trained in pulmonary and critical care,
Mhm.
and so then you decide to do more training in sleep medicine. Was that a scary decision at all at that point? Because you're probably making better money after, or you have the potential to make better money after being completing your fellowship in pulmonary and critical care, and then it's like, oh, we're going to do more training in this new specialty.
Such an interesting and great question. In reality for me, my first I had I knew going into it, I unfortunately that I was 100% responsible for all medical school costs. And I went to Tufts and thank you, Tufts, for my wonderful education that I'm still paying for and probably be paying for the next 10 years. The reality is that it was incredibly expensive, but I felt like it was something that I just needed to do. So I looked at it like I'm going to have to pay off medical school debt for as long as I'm working, which is in my mind, you work until you're dead. That was the philosophy that I grew up with.
Yeah.
So I just never thought I would not work. And so I just put that kind of aside. I didn't really stress out about the debt of medical school because it was going to be there regardless of what I did. So when I had my first job paid, of course, much better than, being a fellow, but I used to moonlight as a fellow. So, I kind of was like, okay, this is more money. This is great. I did not perceive that I was wealthy at all. And I had joined my first private practice at that point. And, what was offered was sort of the best that I could get, but it wasn't wonderful. It wasn't like, oh, wow, I'm going to make so much. I'm like, it's more than I am, but it's was on par for what could be expected at the time. Um, the person I worked with actually was deeply invested in doing a lot of sleep medicine. So I was doing a lot of the pulmonary ICU. He was doing a lot of the sleep medicine. And I was around all of a sudden this exposure to so much sleep and what it meant to get quality sleep. I also was taking call literally every other week. And I was like, I don't think this is sustainable. This is way too much call in a very tiny practice. And so I was like, I'm not getting any sleep. He's doing sleep. He talks about sleep. It's all about sleep apnea, but I know there's more to it than that. And my fellowship experience was fairly unique in that we had a lot of sleep exposure. I was in sleep clinic all the time, so I had this kind of constant exposure to sleep. Really, for me, my dad had some health issues. A sleep fellowship position was offered to me, and I just felt like I need to be an attending. I needed to feel like I was a pulmonary critical care attending. So I actually went and worked for a couple of years. The position became available again. Something was calling me to it. You could say it was meant to be, and I went trained in California, returned to New Jersey for a couple of years, went back to California, and it was at that time, it was mandatory. You could not become board certified in sleep unless you did a full year of sleep fellowship, and I did it, and it literally changed my life. So for anybody who's listening who is a relatively new graduate, you know what it's like. Even when you leave your residency or your fellowships, you have your call schedule. You have the high pressure environment. You have to live up to the expectations that perhaps you have on yourself or what your attendings are expecting you to deliver, and obviously wanting to be provide excellent patient care. Um, and then you do sleep fellowship. And yes, you want to do all those things, but guess what? You don't really take call. I mean, you have a pager in case there's some issue that happens in the sleep lab, which from my lips to God's ears did not occur that year. I don't think I got paged once. It was amazing. And I spent a year not taking call. And there's something that happens in your biology when all of a sudden you don't have that, like, what's the emergency? Why am I getting paged? What's going to be at the other end of that phone call? What's the situation with that patient? Because coming from an ICU background, my phone calls are never like, hey, everything's fine. It's like, I need a bed. This is going on. Like, there's some emergency, right? So I went from this like heightened sense of everything is always an emergency, especially when I get paged in the middle of the night, to suddenly like no pages. I found myself able to fall asleep. I found myself able to stay asleep. I was getting more sleep than I had for the entirety of my career, even dating back to college. And I really was like, there's something to this. I feel different. This is amazing. So my horizons expanded. So yeah, that's where I knew. I was like, "Oh man. Oh man, I did all this training and it was really fun to feel fulfilled as a pulmonary critical care doctor, but now I have this extra training and now I'm really feeling like I'm coming into my own." Like the just what I wanted to do shifted from that experience.
What did you learn during that experience that kind of convinced you to go into sleep medicine? What did you see, I guess, that made you make this change that you didn't see in your undergrad, learning about psychology, or in your medical school, of course, where you study a lot of different things? Is sleep not mentioned in the medical school curriculum, though, to the level it should be?
I would absolutely say that that is correct. Sleep is not discussed as it should be. And quite frankly, when I trained, we didn't have as much of regulation surrounding your hours that you worked and such. And so it was almost like a badge of honor. It'd be like, hey, I had a really tough surgical rotation. I didn't sleep at all. And it was almost like, I'm tough. I didn't sleep. Right. Now you wouldn't even think about thinking that that was an okay situation. That was standard. Nobody discussed sleep in any kind of real depth. It wasn't really flashy or exciting or emphasized. And medical school training is kind of about like learning how to be sleep deprived and still function at a high level. At least it was in my day. So there is definitely a lack of education there. And once I did my year where I really focused very deeply, I had my main exposure as a pulmonary doctor was we saw these OSA patients. And part of the reason we had all this exposure in sleep clinic is primarily people came in with sleep apnea. They had their CPAP units. These units needed to be checked for compliance data, etc. So we did a lot of obstructive sleep apnea, which is obviously incredibly common in the United States. And the veteran population has a lot of sleep apnea. They also have a lot of insomnia. We didn't get as much training in insomnia in pulmonary. So when I started my sleep fellowship, then I'm learning about insomnia. I'm learning about all of these central disorders of hypersomnia. I'm learning that, hey, you can punch and kick and act out your dreams and you might have REM behavior disorder. I'm like, whoa, what is this stuff? You're
Mm.
learning about brain waves. That's something that we really, other than ordering an EEG and pestering neurology to come take a look, and learning about spike and wave. That's like sort of the extent of it. That's just a pattern that you see on the EEG. It's to get that other exposure. I'm like, the world of sleep is much bigger than I had thought it was just from my pulmonary ICU fellowship. So those things really impacted me in a way. And quite frankly, my quality of life improved. And it was because I was sleeping. I had a regular schedule. I had freedom to become more creative about what I thought my future could be. My horizons were broadened. So huge implications for just how we think about the world.
And I've seen this firsthand with friends and family members. And in one instance, individual went from there was kind of comorbidities, other existing problems, but they went from obstructive sleep apnea where they were having severe depression, headaches every day. All of a sudden, they're trying the CPAP for a week, and then their headaches have gone or have been reduced. Right there, their depression symptoms have been a lot more mild. It's a lot easier to be treated with their medication, and so that really was something that growing up, my parents, because I think I was born around the time you started your residency, so
Oh
things had
gosh.
advanced a little bit, I think, since then. So I was told like all the time, right? It's so important. It's so important. But as a very young, like rebellious person, right? I didn't want to listen to my parents. You know what I mean? I wanted to stay up late and do whatever. And so I kind of didn't take it seriously until I saw some of these firsthand changes. And it was like, wow, how many, you know, diagnoses could we have had or medications could we have given this family member if the neurologist didn't say, you need to go to a sleep doctor first, right? Because they're presenting with so many different problems. This episode of The Strategy of Health was sponsored by Modality Global Advisors. Modality Global Advisors optimizes hospital revenue, enhances patient experience, and delivers proven results. Visit modalityglobaladvisors.com to learn more.
That's it. It's a mindset shift from what we're traditionally taught is this patient is presenting with X number of symptoms. They're diagnosed with blank. You've made that diagnosis. This is the appropriate treatment. This is the algorithm if they have one. These are the medications that you use, right? That's sort of, we're problem solvers.
Yep.
To go into sleep and realize that, yes, I have the capability of doing just what I've done with all the other things I do, which is be a problem solver. But now the problem is if I fix your sleep and you are healthy, am I now problem solving and delaying? Right? We all inevitably get
Mhm.
sick. Crap happens. We can't predict the future. But if we're looking at optimizing the potential for having health in our life, good health, quality health dictates the quality of your life, period. If
Mhm.
you feel like crap, doesn't matter how much money you have or any of these other things that we deem to be important in our society. The reality is our health is important and it's precious. And sleep, I've come to realize, is truly foundational. It's like the base layer. You need a good foundation in order for the house to be built. And without sleep, you don't have a lot of the protective mechanisms that are so important to clearing the evil humors from our brain, for example, and having us just sleep better, just having us think better, feel better. You mentioned mood, breathe better. All of it comes back to having a good quality of sleep, sufficient sleep duration, and consistency if possible. mean, obviously, we're talking about the ideal world, but making it a priority is the only way to really change anything. So that's my goal is prevention. So you're hitting the nail on the head, changing the paradigm of how we approach healthcare.
Well, because snoring, right? It used to be like a meme, right? Like a lot of people snoring, and then or disturbed sleep as an elderly person, right? It's like,
Hmm.
oh, you're over 60, you only sleep 3 hours a night because you're back pain or etc. And so it used to just be something that, at least in pop culture, is expected and tolerated. And we've seen that in a way with other things as well, right? Like the American obesity crisis. I'm obese. I suffer from obesity, working with my doctor to get it treated. But we've kind of like expected these things to go on in American culture, right? And they're really like the foundational building blocks of health. One of the questions I have in that case, we've seen with obesity, Wegovy and treatments like this have started to help with that. But the sleep situation is a bit different because it seems like we have treatments, right? I mean, we have the
Hmm.
CPAP, we have a lot of other things, but yet people don't know the diagnosis or they don't care, et cetera. Do you think technology, like Apple the other day, you might have seen announced that they're going to
Hmm.
sleep, yeah, apnea detection on the wristwatch. Do you think that's going to create more and more demand as time goes on and get more and more people diagnosed?
I think it's going to alert people to a problem. So you have, I think Samsung actually has an FDA approved algorithm or something on their watch. I think Samsung is approved. I just saw something that popped up. It was literally like one of those tiny little paragraphs that you see from like the ASM bulletin saying that there's now a mat that might be FDA cleared for treatment of sleep apnea, or not, excuse me, not, let me rephrase that, a mat that may be able to detect sleep apnea and is getting FDA approval. And then you have Apple with their algorithms, and they're deeply invested in doing research with sleep scientists. Take a look at their algorithms and how they can help to improve sleep. Um, the bottom line is that there's pros and cons to commercial products. The con is something we call orthosomnia. That's when you literally have almost an obsession with what your data is showing you. All of these things are just tools. So I always caution people. I don't poo poo commercial products. I think they're helpful for people to gauge. I mean, one of the ways I use it is for people who are not so great at filling out their sleep diary and they're having trouble sleeping. And I'm like, all right, well, you're wearing your watch. Let me see what that shows. And then I get a much better sense than what they're reporting to me, what actually might be going on. And again, I take it as it's not the same thing as coming in and having multiple nights of a polysomnogram and gold standard, diagnostics, but it is helpful to get a pattern.
Yeah.
And if your watch is alerting you to an abnormal heart rhythm or a fast heart rate at night, hey, that's something we see with sleep apnea. If it's alerting you that there's drops in your oxygen levels, again, it's not going to be the same level of data, but it could be very helpful. So, again, you got to be careful about getting obsessed with it. But I do think it's a tool that you're right. I do think it's going to increase demand. I think the challenge is going to be okay. We have demand. um, where are the providers out there, right?
Right.
Who are the people that can take care of them, and also what are we doing in healthcare? Insurance coverage, working with physicians such as myself to make it fair and balanced. I mean, just trying to have us see patient after patient after patient where they're waiting 6 months in line and then you have 10-15 minutes to see them at most and they have a complex sleep case is not fair to that person. And it's one of the reasons that I got into sort of the entrepreneurial spirit. And as I mentioned to you, my journey was a traditional medical model, which I never in a million years thought would change for me. I just thought, okay, well, I'm now a medical director. I'm happy about this. I've developed the sleep program. This is very exciting. This is where my future is. And then it wasn't. And I don't regret the change at all. I mean, the fact is that starting a sleep telemedicine program that really is an out of network kind of model, I can see you for 60 minutes because that's appropriate for you.
Hmm.
There is no line, you were paying for your services up front and we will admit a super bill for you. It's just a different way of practicing for the patient who really cares about getting deep into the weeds, who doesn't want to wait in line for 6 months to have 10-15 minutes with the doctor, who's going to be like, all right, I'm not going to talk to you about all your options because that takes too long. Here's some CPAP. Bye bye. Right. who's going to take the time to say, listen, there are multiple options. These are what the multiple options are. This is what the latest data says might be the appropriate starting point for you. This is my plan B and my plan C, and this is where research is going in the future. That's the level of conversation I like to have with my patients. And that's not for everyone. But if that's the kind of conversation you want to have, find me. I will see you. We will chat.
Well, and I appreciate because that was going to be my next question too. Is it's like,
Hmm.
okay, we have this technology coming out. It might help some people, but it's not going to solve all of the issues, right? Like you were saying, like it's not you're not going to be able to cure every sleep issue going on or detect every sleep issue just by this Apple Watch. So that's not going to do everything. What is the solution, right? And that kind of goes down to why did you get involved in the business end of things, right? You probably make reasonable money as any kind of physician, right? And so there's that aspect of it where you're able to maintain your standard of living. You have a family of these things going on, and this seems like another responsibility to take on, right? And so I have to ask, what motivated you to say I'm gonna pursue adding on even more things? What was the deep motivation for you there?
Well, the deep motivation is that I couldn't continue to live the lifestyle I was living as a full time practicing clinician,
Hmm.
point blank. Our call schedule was not what my original job was, which was every other week, thankfully. But it was every month or so, 7 days in a row,
Hmm.
my phone would go off. I needed to make sure the residents felt comfortable with the plan of action for admitted ICU patients. There would be other questions that you're triaging. And there's endless tasks with all of the patient volume that you have. And I really, truly cannot even explain to you how much I miss many of the patients that I've treated. But I had to make a decision because nobody was going to look out for me but me. And at the end of the day, you have to look at your life and say, what is most important? Is it that it was the career of Dr. Cole? If that's the case, maybe my path would be different. For me, my priority shifted when I was gung ho pulmonary critical care. Yeah, ICU, go, go, go. I didn't have any kids. I wasn't married. Life happens. And now I have two little beings that are wanting to know why mommy can't really be emotionally present for them. And that's because I'm having dinner. I've just been paged and I got to deal with an emergency.
Right.
I am so doggone tired from rounding in the ICU during COVID that I've got to take a bath. Don't touch mommy. I don't want to get you sick. The level of concern that you give to your patients, it's very difficult to give that concern to everybody in your life. So who's most important? For me, it was prioritizing family. And the career trajectory I was at was not allowing me to prioritize them in a way that I felt was appropriate. So for me, even though it sounds like, oh my goodness, you're doing all this work, you're becoming an entrepreneur. Did I have any training in any of this? Oh, heck no. I just figured it out. And it's one of those things where it's having the faith to know that you feel it inside. For me, it was just like a gut, like it's time for a change. I really didn't have a huge plan or an elaborate construct of how I was going to navigate that world. I just knew I needed a break. I was going to give myself that grace, and that at the other end of that break, it was going to work out.
What makes me a little concerned though for our other colleagues,
Mhm.
especially your colleagues, the physicians, is now you do other things, right? You have 4 or 5 things going on, right? And so you're more efficient, it seems like, or you're more productive now than when you were just doing the one thing, but it seems like you're less burnt out, right? From what you're saying, you made this change, so it would seem like you're less burnt out. So here's the concern though, right? We clearly can't have a system that burns people out all the time, right? By just having patient after patient. What changes could be made, right, so that we don't end up having extremely talented physicians like yourself go on and say, I can't see patient after patient anymore. I'm going to go and work on 4 or 5 other businesses, and it'll be easier than staying with this one job, right? What changes could happen? Do we need more physicians? Do we need a complete rewrite of how it's built? Like, what would you recommend?
Cole, I think whatever I say, someone's going to have a criticism for, and it's going to be valid. So I'm just going to tell you what I think it is, and you can feel free to say, that's completely wrong, and I'm all right with that because I'm not saying that I have a specific answer. But I definitely think we no longer, as physicians, I'm speaking as physicians. I'm not talking about APPs, though I have tremendous respect for what they bring to the table. I'm speaking from the physician perspective. We no longer have any power. It's very difficult to get physicians united. There's a lot of other groups that are very vocal that are united, that approach a problem together. They come together to try to solve that problem. It's like herding cats, I feel like sometimes with us. We're all very opinionated, we're all very educated, and it can be a challenge to get us all on the same page. But we have relinquished our power, the respect of all the years of training, we've relinquished it, and we've relinquished it to various groups who, um, feel that perhaps that level of education is not as necessary as I believe it is to really give comprehensive care. It may be to organizations that control the money, which is reimbursement. And I'm talking about insurance plans. And if I have to say it, these are groups that are telling us what to do. They're not allowing us to practice medicine as we want, and there needs to be a significant upheaval of that. I also think there's a lot of middlemen that are involved in a lot of processes where you have these sort of other companies coming in. They need to be paid too. So you're sort of driving up the cost of care. You're decreasing access, and you know, you've got to pay people for their time. It is inflation, expenses. It's very difficult to actually have a practice that runs well. And the solution can't be, well, I'm just going to plug and play and see one more patient because there's only so much time in a day. People deserve to have some balance in their lives. Um, and they deserve to get good sleep. I sound like a huge dork for emphasizing that again, but at the end of the day, the single thing that keeps me from feeling burnt out, from allowing me to do multiple things, and have, my creative outlets with podcasting, to still see patients, work on continuing medical education, is specifically because at the end of the day, my nervous system is regulated. I truly feel like I'm going to get most of my sleep. Now I got a puppy because I'm a glutton for punishment. But when the puppy is fully trained, I will return to having an optimal night of sleep to the best of my abilities. I don't sleep great, but with consistency and hard work and having a routine, it's much better. It's much better.
How do you identify what that is? What a good night's sleep is for you?
Oh, God. I think it's just how you feel over time. And if you have suspicion there's something funky going on, get tested. You know how many sleep tests I've done? I've done a home polysomnogram. I've done an in-lab polysomnogram. I've said love to test home sleep test equipment. I'm always curious what people have come up with. What's comfortable? What should I be using for my patients or considering in the future? And all of that data has told me I really don't truly have anything I need serious to worry about. I don't have any substantial sleep apnea. Um, just a little bit of mild sleep apnea after a couple glasses of wine and then trying a test at a conference, I have to admit. So now I know I have my oral appliance to use if there's going to be any wine consumption. But other than that, I'm okay. So I do go to bed with that peace of mind that there's not a true medical issue going on.
Like, so if you are a, kind of liaison or commercial insurer, especially one that is working for an employer insurance plan, make sure we are covering and encouraging those sleep tests, right? Because
Yes, yes. And I do think we need to start approaching it from, if you live in a certain part of the country, there's a lot of testing that may be more expensive that you can get approved, that you can't get approved in the Northeast, for example. Why is there that disparity?
Mhm.
If why is it taking so long to get a CPT code for home polysomnograms if the technology is already there? There's a lot of questions there that we need to work toward because the technology's there. Let's kind of move beyond politics, concerns about protecting our own market share, and do what's better for people in general and for their health.
See, it is interesting because you talk about how you're worried about kind of losing the physicians losing the voice, and then physicians in the importance of the education. But then you also discuss focusing on the patient and on the outcomes. And I think that that's kind of refreshing, right? Because a lot of times you don't hear someone say one and the other at the same time, right? Usually it's physicians need a voice, everything else can just kind of get the wayside. But I like how you emphasize both points.
Well, I truly believe that people who go through what we've been through, if anybody's not a physician listening to the show, it is a unique rite of passage. The crap that you go through to get that MD or that DO degree after your name. It's incredibly, incredibly challenging to go through the training, the sleep deprivation, the fear of hurting someone because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's having not missing that diagnosis, finding that zebra, even though most of it is going to be a common problem. Can you find that unicorn disease process that nobody else can? I mean, we go into this, it's you ask any med student, and even though they've come up with a creative answer to take with them on their interview, at the end of the day, there's something within them that wants to make the world a better place, to help others. And I think by saying physician voice, it's not physician voice or patients. Having a more solid physician voice is how we're going to help our patients because we are the ones that know what they need. We eat, live, breathe. We've sacrificed our entire 20s, some of us, and into our 30s, our quote youth years. We've sacrificed them to help others. And that deserves to be recognized.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Dr. Cole, for coming on. We're going to have you back on again so we can talk even more because there's so many more questions I'd like to ask. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope we can have you back on again soon.
Thank you so much, Kole, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.